Nick is over the other side of the desk with today's papers. He's starting out today with that meeting we've been telling you about here in Paris of coalition partners fighting the Islamic State organisation, Nick.
Well, this is something that's been covered massively by the New York Times website. If you go to that, they have a room for debate section, and there's a series of articles, but its main question is really, can victory over ISIS, the Islamic State organisation, ever be more than a mirage? And it's asking what can be done. Will foreign weapons, for example, defeat ISIS or make things worse? There you can see that cover story. Well worth going to that website, the New York Times website, because there are a series of articles, 7 in fact, really giving you a full picture of the debate. I chose one of them. It's by Mia Bloom, who's an expert on suicide bombings, and she is arguing that the coalition should really exploit the splits that are already there in the Islamic State group. Now, she says that one of them is really between the locals on the ground and the foreign fighters. So foreign fighters, they have more privileges, she says. They are given more money. And one of the sources of resentment for locals is, of course, as we hear so often, the horrific treatment of women who are captured. So she says that social media, Western powers should use social media to really focus on the local people who are with ISIS and actually fuel the resentment against the foreign fighters and the whole horrific treatment of torture and capturing of women locally.
Now, the future of Syria is also a very important part of this equation, isn't it? I mean, you've seen a piece by former top US diplomat saying lessons from the Balkan conflict 2 decades ago, of course, could be very useful.
Well, this is a really fascinating article if you love that whole question of can the history angle really work for you. Christopher Hill is a former US ambassador to Iraq. He was Assistant Secretary of State to East Asia at one point in his career. And he's saying that let's look back at the Balkan crisis 20 years ago. Then we had Slobodan Milosevic, who was the real bugbear in terms of international diplomacy. And he is the equivalent in this scenario that we have today of Assad. Now, he's saying that what we should really focus on is the fact that in this Syria crisis, we are not including everybody. We're excluding Assad. And back in the Balkans, in the days of the Balkan War, there was a contact group plan. There was an effort to get in touch with Milosevic and Radovan Karadzic. Jimmy Carter, US president, went to see Karadzic. That kind of thing is not going on, is the argument. And what is needed, he says, is a Syria contact group plan, which will really focus international attention. Brilliant article, well worth reading.
You've also found a piece by the British journalist Robert Fisk, always good to see material from him. He's embedded with the Syrian army, isn't he? He said his first dispatch.
Well, we're hearing again day to day of the horrific violence that the Islamic State organisation is perpetrating, and the fighting in Syria you can learn about this Tuesday from Robert Fisk directly, who's embedded with the 3rd Armoured Division of the Syrian army. The quote there, "This is the horror of a terrifying war. The general hands me another mobile phone image showing a row of Syrian soldiers kneeling on the ground, bearded after days in captivity, a jihadi executioner standing behind the man nearest the camera, a pistol pointed at his head." So day to day we're seeing that. You can see the headline speaks for itself. A video of a decapitated head sent via phone to a soldier. So that if you have the courage to read that article, it's one of a series from Robert Fisk for The Independent in the UK.
OK, Nick, thanks very much. And also the Washington Street Journal. They're reporting on what it calls the surveillance fiasco. Of course, this was very much in the news this time yesterday, wasn't it?
Well, the whole wrangling in the Hill in Washington continues. The Wall Street Journal coming out, unsurprisingly, in favour of the Senate's in what was a no-deal situation in terms of how to deal with intelligence surveillance. Now, a blackout is underway. That should be resolved by the end of the week. The cartoon in the Christian Science Monitor sums up a bit of the mood in the States. If we have a look at it, we can see a former NSA guy, National Security Agency eye, on the streets begging for food. I will snoop for food, he says. So, a bit of the mood and wrangling and yes, a fiasco in the Hill. Again, Stuart.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. Nick Rushworth taking the pick of the world's papers for us. Thanks a lot.